Hello and welcome back to a new episode of your 9 favorite true crime podcast, the True Crime Cocktail Hour. My name is Holly. I'm so glad you had time to join me again. So after a tough week of work and the weekend just around the corner, I think it is time for us to wind down a bit. So you know how it goes. I'll be mixing us a little after work cocktail, and while I do that, I will also tell you the story of a true crime case. And today's case, I'll admit, is a little bit different than the cases I usually cover, but just as spectacular, and it's one of Germany's biggest crime cases. It made headlines worldwide, so maybe you've even heard about it. So let's not waste any more time. I get everything ready, and then we get started with case number 94, a murderer in the cockpit. It is the 24th of March, 2015. The place, a control center of the French air traffic control in Marseille, France. It is 10:30 a.m. and it is a Tuesday. The workday has just begun for one of the air traffic controllers responsible for the sector/area of the French Alps that day. So far, it's been a completely normal day. No incidents. And then a German registered airplane appears on the radar of the air traffic controller. Flight number 4U9525, an airplane from Lufthansa's subsidiary Germanwings. It had just taken off in Barcelona a few minutes earlier and was on its way to the German city of Düsseldorf. 144 passengers, mostly Germans, among them 12 students of a high school who visited Barcelona for a language course. 6 crew members, 2 pilots, and 4 flight attendants. But suddenly, as if by ghostly hand, the airplane vanished from the air traffic controller's radar at 10:40 a.m. Something like that happens very, very rarely, but could also be due to a radar malfunction or a transponder failure of the aircraft. However, the air traffic controller can't detect any malfunction, and so he repeatedly tries to establish contact, orders the pilots to give an all clear. But no response. Not even 2 minutes have passed, but for air traffic control, 2 minutes without any contact to an airplane is close to an eternity. So this air traffic controller immediately informs other control centers, and he also triggers an alarm. Now you have to imagine it like the fire department, okay? Everything is set and ready, an alarm is triggered, and military aircrafts rise into the sky in no time and search for the missing plane. The search lasts for about half an hour, but then the military pilots discover aircraft debris on a steep mountainside in the French Alps. And it is indeed debris of the German airplane flight number 4U9525. There are no survivors. So immediately, the French military, the French gendarmerie, a crisis team, and then also agents from the German Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accident Investigation are assembled to find out the cause of the crash. So at first, they assume it was a technical issue, a technical defect. I mean, what else could it be, right? However, right at the beginning, members of the French air traffic control made a remark in the presence of German agents that set alarm bells ringing for many. They said that this plane did not fall out of the sky like a stone, but like more controlled, almost like a normal landing approach, just much, much faster. Everyone responsible knows that with a technical defect, that's actually impossible. Meanwhile, this crash has made its way into worldwide media.
Am Tag nach dem Flugzeugabsturz in den französischen Alpen.
Hello and welcome to BBC World News. We have breaking news this hour, and a plane is reported to have gone down.
Beaucoup sont arrivés par hélicoptère déjà, d'autres s'y dirigent. French President François Hollande and German Chancellor Angela Merkel have flown over the remote region in the French Alps, where a Germanwings plane crashed yesterday, killing 150 people. They were later joined by Spain's Mariano Rajoy in the village of Saint-les-Alpes, the headquarters of the search operations.
But while the authorities are still in the middle of their investigation and no exact cause for the accident has been officially announced, the New York Times drops an absolute bombshell.
We begin with breaking news on several fronts. First, the jet crash in the Alps, that 8-minute descent, and tonight what could be a crucial new clue. The New York Times now reporting that one of the pilots might have been locked out trying to get back into the cockpit.
48 hours after the crash, they released an article, and in it they claimed that one of the pilots might be responsible, that one of the pilots had deliberately crashed this airplane. So this in itself is a huge scandal. What made it even worse, though, is that the New York Times said that the source they had for this theory were members of the French military, so people who were directly involved in this investigation. That was insane, and everyone kind of picked up on that. You heard it everywhere on the news channels, in the newspapers, and suddenly the word murder appeared everywhere, and the Lufthansa had some serious explaining to do. The thing is that unfortunately, the current investigation results point exactly in that direction. First of all, authorities discovered that the buttons on the flight monitor had been manipulated. Something like that can't happen by accident. Plus, this weird remark coming from the French air traffic control saying that the airplane was in a descent. And then there were the recordings of the public voice recorder that was luckily found just one day later between the wreckage. So according to the voice recorder, everything initially goes according to plan. No incidents. But then you can hear one of the pilots getting up from his seat and leaving the cockpit, probably to go to the bathroom or something. You can hear the door closing again and the lock engaging. That means no one can enter the cockpit from the outside unless they have the code that has to be entered on a keypad right in front of the cockpit door. A safety measure that was also adopted by Germany after the attacks of September 11th. But shortly after the pilot leaves the cockpit, the airplane accelerates significantly and a descent is initiated. Just a few seconds later, you can hear a knock on the cockpit door. First soft and then louder and more urgent. But there is no response in the cockpit, nor does it sound like the door is being opened. The only thing you can hear is the calm and controlled breathing of the remaining pilot in the cockpit. Next thing you hear is loud knocking, hammering against the cockpit door, and you can hear the voice of the pilot that left the cockpit ordering this door to be opened immediately. And it is the voice of the captain, Patrick Sondenheimer. So that means the remaining pilot in the cockpit is the co-pilot. The last thing that can be heard on this voice recorder are screaming passengers and the calls of the captain. And then the recording stops at 10:41 a.m., the moment of impact. No one, and I really mean no one, can believe that the co-pilot might be responsible for this crash. I mean, generally, every pilot has to undergo regular checkups and examinations, including their mental state, to ensure unrestricted fitness to fly. Also, conversations with family members, his friends, his colleagues, everyone revealed no clue why this might have happened and why he did what he did. Everyone is truly surprised and truly shocked. But the technical and forensic evidence is clear. For example, the cockpit door. It actually should have opened automatically when the captain entered the code. The only explanation for why it didn't is that the cockpit door was also manipulated and blocked from the inside. All inputs and all settings needed to initiate a descent and increase the speed of the airplane were made solely on the co-pilot's flight panel, and his calm breathing suggested deliberate action. And so, the cause of the crash was determined and the culprit was identified. This aircraft was deliberately brought down by the co-pilot Andreas Lubitz. So at the time of the crash, Andreas Lubitz was 27 years old and he grew up in the city of Montabaur. Now it is said that it was his childhood dream to become a pilot. Like his room was decorated with like posters and model airplanes, and he also made his glider's license the second he could to be able to fly as early as possible. And so in 2008, he began his training to become a pilot in the city of Bremen. Now, let me get something straight. You can't just waltz in there and be like, here I am. No, you first have to undergo a multi-day aptitude test that just very, very few pass at all. Are you familiar with the 12 tasks of Asterix? Child's play, okay? So bottom line, what the fuck? Why would someone who always wanted to become a pilot, who is still that young, commit suicide by airplane and then take 149 other people with him? Authorities find the answer to that question in his apartment in Düsseldorf. So may I present to you the things they found in his apartment in increasing order of disturbing details. So the first thing they found in his apartment were medications. A lot of them. And all of them associated with severe mental illnesses. As a matter of fact, traces of these medications were also found in his tissue samples they found at the crash site. A drug against anxiety disorder, a drug against depression, and sleeping pills. I mean, with this mix of medications in his system, the co-pilot shouldn't have even set foot on an airplane. What they also found were sick notes. And one of these sick notes was even issued by, get this, one of his psychiatrists for the day of the crash that the co-pilot had never even submitted to his employer. In addition, they found his diary and a whole bunch of medical reports from up to 40 different doctors, but more on that later. Oh, right. And then there was the tablet. So his Google search history is just proof of a mental state downward spiral, okay? It started with a lot of Google searches about illnesses, physical and mental. Then it progressed to Google searches about various methods of suicide. And just a few days before the crash, this co-pilot sat down and Googled how to manipulate the cockpit door from the inside so it could no longer be opened from the outside. But how, in fact, did his mental problems develop? What had happened? Why the hell did no one notice anything? Apparently not even the doctors who assess his fitness to fly.
While that captain was out of the cockpit, as we know, that was the flight from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. On the return flight, that is the one where the captain went out of the cockpit again, and for the final time, Lubitz locks the door, and then the plane descends into the French Alps, killing all 150 people on board that flight. We do know that French investigators are scheduled to release more information at a news conference later on this afternoon. We will listen into that news conference and bring along any breaking details as soon as we get them into our newsroom. Back to you in the studio.
Well, it all began in the year 2009. So Andreas had just moved from Montabaur to Bremen to attend training to become a pilot, right? And it is said that this new responsibility of living alone, this new environment, being away from home, and the increasing demands of his training triggered a severe depression. He was completely overwhelmed. Grow a pair. However, Apparently, he really did have panic attacks and sleeping disturbances. And all of it got so bad that he had to interrupt his training. So he moved back in with his parents, he started therapy, and he was still really determined to become a pilot, right? So he really wanted to get healthy again. So after completing therapy, his plan was to move back to Bremen and obviously finish what he had started, finish his training to become a pilot. But first, he had to undergo severe discussions with psychiatrists to assess whether he was really fit to be a co-pilot with a history of depressive episodes. So Andreas did that, and everyone basically knew that there was always a good possibility, a good chance of reoccurring depressive episodes, right? But apparently Andreas was good and ready. He was doing fine. Therapy did its thing. And so a fitness to fly certificate was issued for the time being. That being said, this fitness to fly certificate would become invalid the second he developed another depressive episode that required treatment. I mean, for 5 years, everything was good. No depressive episodes. Until Christmas time of 2014. That's when he visited his general practitioner and told him that he had problems with his eyes. Now, we don't really know what kind of problems he had with his eyes. What we do know is that the doctor examined him but couldn't find an organic cause for his eye problems. Now, and even though the doctor never said any such thing, Lubritz was so shaken by his eye problems and the lack of an organic cause for it that in his already fragile mental state of mind, he came to one conclusion and one conclusion only. He will go blind sooner or later. Lubritz developed an obsession, a hyperfixation on his eyes. He would go blind, and there was nothing he could do about it. And he had to stop working as a pilot, give up his childhood dream. So over the next couple weeks and months, he visited up to 40 different eye doctors and specialist clinics, but they all confirmed what his general practitioner had already said. His eyes are fine, and there is no organic cause for his issue. So with the things that we know now, it is assumed that he did in fact maybe have eye problems, but that they were a side effect of an impending mental illness or another depressive episode. His diary entries from then on dealt exclusively with his eyes, nothing else. And it was always just like one sentence or a couple of words, okay? Tuesday, eyes are fine. Wednesday, eyes are okay. Friday, went to Dr. ABC, no results. Like every entry written by himself said the same thing. His eyes are fine. Now, despite the fact that all of these doctors told him that there is no reason to get worried, Lubritz was so obsessive and became so fixated on the idea of impending blindness that over time he developed a so-called hypochondriatric depressive episode. The psychiatrists he discussed this issue with urgently advised him to seek therapy, seek help. They wrote him sick notes for more than a couple of weeks, and they prescribed sleeping pills to help him sleep. But Lubritz knew very well that treatment would make him unfit to fly in the eyes of Lufthansa. He would have to find a new job, work a different job to live off of, and also pay off the 100,000 euros he had taken out for his training. He had never taken out disability insurance, and now, spontaneously, the premiums were just way too expensive. And so, a couple of days before the crash, he wrote down a list that was also later found in his apartment, titled Decision Someday. And on this list, he had written down arguments, pros and cons, for and against treatment and sick note, and for and against suicide. And, well, he picked, as you know, suicide. The question is, Why would he take 149 people with him? Wanting to cause harm to others is not a symptom of depression. But psychiatrists and doctors who reviewed his medical reports and all of that after the crash came to the same conclusion, namely that Andreas Lubitz over here, aside from being depressed, was also a textbook narcissist. The fact that he decided to commit suicide by airplane was merely symbolic. If he cannot be a pilot anymore, he might at least die in one. And once he had made that decision, everything else and everyone else became irrelevant, became unimportant. His needs came first. And as you may know, narcissists are said to be very manipulative and very controlling. Everything so no one would notice that they do lack self-confidence, that they don't have everything under control, that they too get desperate and frustrated. The facade must be maintained at all costs. And Andreas Lubitz apparently was so good at it that really no one, no, not his colleagues, not his family members, nor his friends suspected anything. No one except one or two doctors who had examined him as a pilot. People lost their shit, rightfully so, when it became public that his examination forms, especially regarding the mental state and everything, were incomplete or poorly filled out. Sometimes even not filled out at all. Still, after the fact, one or two of these doctors came forward after the crash and said that they actually had doubts about his fitness to fly. But just out of fear of being prosecuted if they said something, and out of fear that no one would confide in them anymore, they remained silent and did not ring any alarm bells with aircraft security. And so, unfortunately, the ticking time bomb that is Andreas Lubitz was allowed to fly a fucking airplane again and again until he put his murder-suicide plan into action. No one was ever held accountable or criminally prosecuted in this case. Neither the doctors, nor air traffic control, nor Lufthansa management could be proven negligent or otherwise responsible. And with his death, Andreas Lubitz escaped prosecution as well as accountability. The only thing that was changed in that regard was the fact that another crew member, another flight attendant, had to be present in the cockpit for whenever one of the pilots would leave. So there would always be two people in the cockpit no matter what. The patient-doctor confidentiality, however, remained unchanged. And that, my dear children, was the story of the crash of flight 4U9525, the Germanwings airplane, brought down deliberately by this piece of shit, Andreas Lubitz. I admit this case was a little bit different, but I think it's super interesting. So I still hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I am this close to 1,000 subscribers. And if you already did, maybe leave a comment, give this video a thumbs up. It helps me, and it's always a nice thing to see. And I know that you enjoy what I do here on my cute little channel. Other than that, I hope we will see each other again in 2 weeks for another cocktail and obviously another true crime case. And for our next case, we'll be heading to Italy, and we'll be talking about two men who met at a New Year's Eve party and wish they never did. Until then, have a lovely weekend. Kisses, mwah, and I'll see you then.